No matter the political stripe, those running for elected office are constantly seeking endorsements. You might even hear some mulling over the possibility that no endorsement is a bad one, just something they can use to their advantage. Donald Trump may perhaps discover there are endorsements he needs to speak out against immediately, because having a guy named David Duke on your side is not considered attractive by any means, at least to intelligent people. From the water cooler to your living room, let's get to work. He's the syndicated radio talker and Newsmax analyst, Larry Elder. She's the senior political analyst at the independent women's forum, Hadley Heath Manning. I thank you both for being here. Let's dig right in. Hadley Heath, for you first. David Duke, as anti-Semitic as it possibly gets, the former Ku Klux Klan leader on his radio show says that Donald Trump's candidacy is a great thing and he's the best of the lot. Hadley Heath, I would be putting jet skis on at the moment to get as far away from this as I possibly could if I was Donald Trump, because you never know when something like this is going to come back to snap you.
Oh, absolutely. And I think any traditional politician, someone who's run a campaign before, would know absolutely that's the first thing you do. You take a step away from this. But Donald Trump is not the political traditional candidate. So I don't know how he's going to respond to this. Probably largely ignore it and move on. But it's no surprise to me to see David Duke talking about Donald Trump in this way.
You know, Larry, maybe that's a point here, because if you just let it go away, maybe it will just go away, because let's be honest here, David Duke is very marginalized these days, but there are reports saying that there are people at some of the Donald Trump rallies screaming white power. Come on, you got to get away from these people as quick as you can.
Ed, I think anybody under 50 has no blooming idea who David Duke is. And speaking of anti-Semitism, Al Sharpton, who ran twice for president and who's probably going to endorse one of the Democrats, has made all sorts of anti-Semitic statements. Nobody has seemed to denounce that. Snoop Dogg, who called women bitches and hoes, says he supports Hillary. Nobody's denouncing that. But you let David Duke, that nobody even heard of in a long time, say something, and all of a sudden it's guilt by association. I think it's unfair.
And why is that? Why is it that those people are getting away with it, Larry?
There's a double standard. When a white Republican has somebody like David Duke says something that reinforces the notion that Republicans are racist, but you let a lefty like Snoop Dogg or Al Sharpton do something, they get a big pass because people feel guilty about racism, and they let black people say things that white people couldn't get away with saying.
All right, now let's talk about somebody else who didn't say something but basically tweeted something. I have always told people, look, if you think for a second that something you're about to tweet is going to be incredibly stupid or insensitive, don't do it. Curt Schilling, former pitcher for the Boston Red Sox, won a World Series with the Red Sox. I covered the team at the time. He retweets this. It said only 5 to 10% of Muslims are extremists. In 1940, only 7% of Germans were Nazis. How'd that go? He retweets that. He gets busted immediately from the Little League World Series coverage by ESPN. Hadley Heath, I got to be honest with you, the guy shouldn't be able to keep his job after. So, look, I know he apologizes, but this is just a brain snap. Look, kids call it a brain fart. I think it's a lot worse than that.
Yeah, you know, I think this is a question, it's a differentiation of freedom of speech and the right to have a job. Nobody has the right to have a job or keep a job. And of course, ESPN has to be wary of their audience and how they're perceived and how their spokespeople are perceived even outside of their professional work. So I think this is sort of brings up the question of how will employers deal with and continue to deal with social media and the individual opinions of people who work for institutions and organizations like ESPN. They have to save face publicly, and they want to distance themselves from this tweet. But freedom of speech is a different question. Of course, he has the right and the freedom to tweet whatever he wants, regardless of how popular it is or how hateful it may be. But he doesn't have the right to keep a job. And so I think this is a question for employers going forward. How are they going to build it into their contracts, what you can and can't say on social media platforms?
There you go. Larry, 30 seconds on this real quick. What about those who will say, wait a minute, his numbers may be right, and he does have the right to say it without fear of losing his job? What about those people?
Well, no, he doesn't. He doesn't have a right to say something without fear of losing his job. Hadley Heath is exactly right. But here again, we have a double standard. George Soros, one of the major donors of the Democratic Party, once likened George W. Bush's propaganda to that of the Nazis. Julian Bond, the late Julian Bond, said the Republicans would like to have the Confederate flag and the swastika flying side by side. Al Gore once accused George W. Bush of unleashing digital brown shirts on the media. For crying out loud, nobody said jack. But you let something like this go down, and Schilling, who happened to be a Republican, gets blasted. Unfair. Double standard. 30
seconds each to both of you. Larry, to you. 1 out of every 12 newborns in the U.S. is an anchor baby, according to Pew Research. Means that 1 anchor baby is delivered every 93 seconds in this country. Why is this being so downplayed by the mainstream media?
Good question. Good question. The mainstream media likes the idea of open borders, likes the idea of a welcoming, diverse community. It's unfair, and the reason for this is the porous borders and the 40% of people that overstay their visas. We police the borders and do something about that. We don't have a problem with anchor babies anymore.
30 to you, Hadley Heath, and a lot of people aren't talking about birth tourism, and that's been going on for decades.
Right, and the ultimate problem here is the welfare state in the United States, because we may have a porous border and we may need to address our immigration policies more broadly, but this goes hand in hand with the question of what does it mean to be a U.S. citizen? What benefits are conferred to you? Of course, we can all celebrate the freedoms of being a U.S. citizen, but that shouldn't mean that the U.S. government is responsible for your health care and your education, all these positive rights that liberals have filed on.
Yeah, and this is a debate that is not going to go away, and it shouldn't either. Hadley Heath Manning, Larry Elder, I thank you both for being here so much. I'm glad I got a laugh out of you in all this. There you go. At least we get something that. Coming up next, telling it like it is, and I'm going to pick a fight with one of the most vile bloggers in America today.